Heavenly Father, thank you so much once again, God. Thank you so much for Marcus, God. I know that you are going to speak through him, God. Speak through him. Just surround him with your peace and open up our hearts and our ears to hear what you have to say to us, God. In your name we pray. Amen. 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 All right, give it up for Marcus.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Yeah.
I know you're eating, so half of you didn't answer. It's all right. Hold up. We're here for an incredible time. But so the reason that Laura has asked me to be here today, and part of this Not Forsaken series, has been a lot of conversation, a lot of personal work that I've been doing on the relationship and healing the wounds of lack thereof, a father figure in my life. Right? And I will tell you that for the first 13 years, my father was present. But he was mentally, physically abusive, not only to myself, but also my mother, my brother and sister, my oldest brother and sister were old enough to leave the house, right? But what I found was that there was a lot of things that I had to uncover and I had to work on to become the man that I'm supposed to be, because when it's my time to have children, I still didn't want those wounds to be passed on, right? So it's taken a lot of prayer. And I'm so grateful for God's grace. So there's a lot of things that I'm going to talk about today, but realizing that just first and foremost, when I heard Not Forsaken, that was something that felt very heavily on my heart, because for a long time I felt like I was. Anybody ever been through something and the first question you ask is, God, why me? And you go, oh, okay, good. Just making sure I'm not alone. And then as I just want to get a feel for the room. So if you don't want to tell on yourself, that's okay. But if you've ever had an issue with a father or a parental figure, father or mother, lack thereof, them not being present, or ever felt as if that was a burden in your life, can you just raise your hand for me? Okay, awesome. Cool. So I know, got a feel for it. Now, for those of you who may have had great parents, right? You were a child at some point. You and your parents butted heads. Anybody who's ever in that space, please raise your hand. Okay, great. That's the other half of the room. So we got everybody covered. Good. Now we're on the same page. Because no matter who you are or what you do, no matter how great or lack thereof your parents were able to show up in your life, there's things that surface on this journey that we call life, because there's no blueprint, there's no game plan. Even the advice that we're given, you know, our parents when are in a good space, or parental figures, or people who step in that space. I will say that for a majority of my life, it was a lot of coaches with sports. So football coaches, baseball coaches. I had one science teacher who stepped in that role and provided a father figure for a period of time. But something that weighed heavy on me is when I asked the question to myself, like, why me? Why, God, was I not able to protect my mom when my father was physically abusive, right? Why did I grow up in a household that from the outside looking in looked like everything was great, but was turmoil and it was hard to sleep at night, right? And something that was always given to me was God's grace. And I was like, God's grace, God's grace, God's grace. And now I don't know about you. And I'm like, God, thank you for your grace, because I can't even imagine, I can't purposely define that. But I was like, what does grace mean for me? Right, like I had to define grace for myself. So I want to read to you guys what my definition and my personal motto with grace is. And it simply says, grace is to give grace to someone who you believe is undeserving of kindness, love, and mercy. In fact, you give them grace when you believe that they deserve punishment. And I got to tell you guys, because of the hurt that I was operating from, my mind was, somebody's got to punish my dad for the turmoil that he caused in my life. But then as I started to understand grace, I was like, here comes forgiveness. Because how many times was I given grace that I probably didn't deserve? Right? How many times did I cause hurt to the people in my life that wasn't warranted, and I could have been punished? To be honest, guys, like my mom, as I was growing up, my mom did an incredible job. She is the pillar of my life. My mother and my grandmother are my go-to. Those are my guardian angels, and they're still with me to this day. But what I realized was that in those 14 years of my existence early on in this life, while I was asking God, why me, why me, why me, my mom is trying to protect me. And I also started to carry a little bit of resentment towards her because I was like, my mom was never the type to like, I don't know, maybe this was you, it wasn't me, where like my mom never coddled me. Like I don't ever remember laying on the couch and my mom rubbing my head or having those soothing like parental moments. And some people like to this day they're like, I'm grown, but I still do that with my mom. I'm like, what? But it's not judgment, it's like foreign to me. It's like a foreign language, like, wait, what? But what I realized was that my mom wasn't able to give love in that way because she was too busy protecting not only herself, but me. And so sometimes I was setting up these expectations of how I wanted my mom to show up in my life, not realizing that her battery was drained. Right? Like, she was in her prayer closet being like, I just need to make it another day to protect my baby. So as I got older, now I look at my mom and I'm like, oh, you gave me the ultimate love. Right? Like, you just start to change the script, like change and shift your perspective. So in developing an understanding of grace, also, it just became really powerful that in my hurt, I was trying to project more hurt, like punish my dad for what he did. So I'll tell you guys, 4 years ago, I sat down with my dad for the first time, like face to face, and I hadn't seen him in 10 years. Because in my mind, I hated him for so long, and I'll tell you guys, it consumed me for 30 plus years of my life. Right, like I hated my father, and I created this hate, and what I did was every time I talked to him, I found a reason in the conversation to pour more gasoline on that fire. And then as I sat in this grace, and it was like this internal conflict, it was like, give grace, hate you. Give grace, I hate you. Give grace, I hate you. I hate me. Because I was being pulled in all these directions, not realizing that I was creating my own hurt. And then I started to be like, wait, if God's giving me grace right now because thou shalt not kill. And again, guys, like, I'm just being transparent with you. In my hurt, I was like, man, how can I take him out? Right? Because I didn't know any other way that I could potentially protect my mom and stop the hurt. And these were some of the thoughts that were generated because even if you've never been in that situation, if you've ever been hurt, sometimes, think about it. It's like, if you shake up a bottle of soda, right? Kids do this stupid stuff all the time. Shake up a bottle of soda and then they take the cap off. What happens? Soda everywhere, right? Well, what I realized was that I was that shaken bottle of soda. And I'm so grateful that God never allowed that cap to come off. Because with that same bottle of soda, if you shake it up but you leave the cap on, what does it eventually do? It settles back down. And that's where I started to realize what God's grace was. It was somebody keeping that cap on till my nerves calmed down. So I couldn't say things and do the things that I didn't genuinely want to do, but my hurt was forcing me to think about. So as I've really gotten a chance to dive into this journey, when we sat down 4 years ago, it was the first time that I looked into my father's eyes and I was like, wow. I created standards and expectations for you that you could have never lived up to. And for the first time we had a real conversation where I got to find out that my grandfather, his father, was mentally and physically abusive. He was a bishop in the church, so no one asked questions, right? And so then my dad's 5 older brothers and 1 younger brother. Of the 5 older, all of them were physically and mentally abusive to their wives and their families. And so I sat back and I'm like, dang, you were just a duplication of your environment. And that wasn't to give him a free pass, but it was to be like, wow, God, it's no longer why me. It's, I needed to be so that I could break the cycle. Right? Somebody had to be put in a situation where it hurt enough that they were like, this isn't right, I'm going to change it. And sometimes, like, I still think back and I'm like, God, well, why me? Why is that my responsibility? And I'm like, if not you, then who? And so the beautiful thing about this is that the healing is starting to show face in so many different relationships, friendships, my business, my career, like my personal life. And I'm just like, wow, how many times does that wound cause you to bleed on people that didn't cut you? Because we'll be like, man, I'm so mad at my dad, but I love my friends. Are you a real friend, though, if you don't heal the wound? Because how can you show up powerfully in your life if you're still crippled by something? It's like the smallest thing. Have you ever had a pebble in your shoe and like walked on it for a while? I don't care how nice you try to be, you're annoyed with that pebble in your shoe, right? But that's the same thing with these healing relationships. And if you allow God to truly step into your life, like, and really help
help you with the healing, everything can change. And so I'm telling you guys, just from my own personal experience, like after that conversation with my dad, granted, he still says things that kind of annoy me, but I realize, I'm like, listen, old man, you're just kind of annoying. It no longer angers me. And now I can love him and to be honest, guys, like this has definitely been a 4-year process, because last week on Thursday, we were on the phone and we're laughing and he's talking crazy, because that's just what he does. And we end the call and he's like, well, you know I love you, son. And before my thoughts preceded it, I was like, I love you too, old man. And I can tell you guys that in my 37 years of life, outside of that moment, I can't recall ever allowing those words leave my mouth. And for the first time, I actually meant it. I was like, I got off the phone and legit, guys, I froze for a moment. I was like, oh, crazy. Called my mom. Hey, you know what I just said? And she was like, what? She was like, really? And I was like, it felt okay. Because now I'm not loving him based on the standard or the expectations I have for him as a father. Because there's 2 things that came to a realization in this journey. Is my dad was what he was, and for me it was toxic and it was hard and it wasn't a healthy environment. But what he did was he gave me a blueprint. Because for those who know me, I love kids. Like put me around kids and everything is right in the world. Because they're perfect in their imperfection. Right? They haven't been tainted by life yet. And it's just been incredible to see, because now I go, you gave me the blueprint of the impact I don't want to have in my child's life when I have kids. Like, of the man that I get to be for my future wife. And for the longest time, I'm like, well, why me? Why me? And all the time, like, God's just like, just wait. You are not being forsaken. I'm giving you what you need so that you can be the change, but also know that you're aware of the signs that aren't going to be able to serve you. Right? Like there's a bigger purpose. And so I also, again, a part of this process is understanding that you don't want to judge your life based on your circumstances, because sometimes when we're in a storm, all we can think about is the storm. And throughout this journey, as you get older, like we become aware of things. For whatever reason, as we get older, we're not actually getting smarter. Right? Like if you actually pay attention, like kids are really intelligent. And if you spend enough time around them, they'll teach you something. Right? But the reason I say that they're so much more intelligent is because they're always open. It's rare that a child closes off to learning something new. But we as adults become so jaded because of our circumstances, our situations, our past, that we close our box and we're like, I already have this figured out. When, if we're going to be honest with us, we have absolutely nothing figured out. Right? But as we can truly start to step into our gifts and our purpose, we start to open up and God's like, listen, I'm just grooming you for the next wave of life. I'm grooming you for your greatness. I'm grooming you for a purpose that I put in you that now you can't hold back once you start to heal these wounds, because you start to operate in ways that you didn't know was possible. You start to do the things that have been on your heart, but you've talked yourself out of. Right? Like, again, I'm just going to be transparent with you guys. My 8th grade speech and debate teacher told me that I was never going to be a public speaker because I don't articulate myself well. And this man, who was somebody that I didn't actually respect, because for myself it was like either basketball or I was going to be a lawyer. But when he planted that seed, because I had already had an issue with male leadership and a lack of father figures in my life, I then took someone who I didn't think of as a father figure, and I put him in that role. Why? Because he gave me negativity, which was in alignment with what I grew up with. So now I put someone on a pedestal that he didn't even deserve to be on, and that went with me for the longest time. And so as I've stepped into, obviously, a new wave of life and a new career, as of 29, like I've actually started taking opportunities like this to speak. I've spoken at a lot of high schools in the Valley, a couple of the colleges, on stages for different leadership events. And I think back and I'm like, man, because I was so in search of a male figure, a father figure in my life, and I didn't look to God early because I was too immature. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I don't need a father figure. On the other side of that, I'm so happy that we get to that early. This is just a reminder, because I don't know if you guys have read this scripture, but I remember in high school, one of my youth group pastors talked about this, and he's like, even Jesus looked for his father's affirmation and confirmation. And I was like, wait, like, that's Jesus, like, he good. Right? Like, in my mind, I'm like, because that's the space that I was in. I was like, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm like, yo, that's Jesus, like, he's good, right? You know, you got God in your back pocket, so you're good, right? But no. And it talks about this in Matthew 3:16. I just want to read it to you guys. And it simply says, and Jesus, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water. And lo, the heavens were opened unto him. And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lightning upon him. And lo, heard a voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, who I am well pleased. And that means a lot to me because at one of our team promotions, we were sitting in this circle and we were just having a transparent moment. People were sharing from their space, and one of the husbands of one of my business partners, he was sitting there and they were like, all right, Bill, well, tell us what you're proud of. And he just kind of sat back and he's like, you know, I'm really proud that I've raised two incredible, beautiful sons. I'm really just proud of that. And as those words came out of his mouth, and now granted, guys, I'm grown now. Like, I've been figuring out, like, I'm good. I'm bawling. Full on crying. Like, I'm sitting in the circle, and everyone's, like, Bill's sitting on that side of the circle, so everyone's looking that way. And I'm melting into the couch, like, what is wrong with me? Like, what? And I'm like, oh, please don't look at me. Please don't look at me. Like, what is going on? And it's uncontrollable. The tears are uncontrollable. What I've also learned is that as men, we've been conditioned to believe that it's a sign of weakness to cry. And you know, ladies, you guys are pillars and our rocks, but also continue to show your emotion and your vulnerability because you also show us the way, right? So thank you for that. When we let go of pride and ego, we actually understand that you're smarter than us. But in that as well, there's a reason that the dynamic is balanced out the way that it is. And in that moment, it was like, man, these tears aren't tears of joy. They're not tears of hurt. They're tears of clarity. And it was like, oh, wow. Because that was the first time in my life I had ever recognized that I truly wish that I had my father there to say, son, I'm proud of you. Right? All the accolades, all the work that I did, you know, all of it went for naught because in that moment I didn't realize that I was always looking for my father to just be like, I'm proud of you. And as great of a job as my mom did, like she's my right hand. Like I live for that woman. She couldn't have given me that. But also in that same breath, as those tears, that's why I say tears of clarity, like passed, I was like, man, because I've been affirming that I want twin boys since I was like 11. Now, if you're a parent of twins, you're probably like, well, you don't know what you're signing up for. Listen, I don't care. I'm like, I want twin boys. I go, wow. Bill's words were right on time, and as nonchalant as they were for him, they meant everything for me because I'm going to get to be that father one day. And it was like, all right, God, I got it. And the other side of it, and this is the powerful part of our journey, right? So sometimes we take our test and we dwell so heavily on our test that we forget to give our testimony. And so we're sitting in that same circle and like no one's paying attention that I'm bawling, like a baby crying, like holding it together. And so we go around and we close out the group and I'm like, no. And God's like, you better speak up. I'm like, no. He's like, you better speak up. Like, don't let your 8th grade teacher win again. Right? Don't mute yourself again. Don't believe that your voice isn't valuable again. And so I shared with the group, and I'm like, again, crying again, and people are crying, and I'm just like, wow, I didn't realize that I'm not the only one that's ever been hurt. Because when we're going through our struggle, we're like, I'm the only one that's ever felt like this. Life's on everybody. And it's not even the parent, it's not the parent dynamic anymore, it's our human dynamic. The people closest to us seem to hurt us the most. But it's when we refuse to heal the hurt and heal the wound that we keep the cycle going. You ever been hurt and not told somebody and they accidentally touch it? Right? That happens in so many areas of our lives. And that's why I committed years ago, like I had to heal the relationship with my dad. Because my physical, like my intimate relationships couldn't actually suffice because I was always worried about somebody hitting a wound that I was hiding instead of healing. Right? Like I had friends, guy friends in my life that like we could get close, but I didn't trust you because I had a wound that I was healing. And no, I didn't want to give it to God because that would have taken a step of humility. And we're kind of in this like age range, and listen, it's like 25 to like 40 from the people that I'm really talking to, where you realize that your childhood is like free, but you have seeds implanted in you that you didn't necessarily know. Like sometimes somebody will say something to you, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not talented enough, right? And they will trump the ones of the people who edify your greatness, right? Like I still had my mom in my corner, like even when I couldn't sing, my mom's like, sing baby, sing. But on the other side, it only takes one person to say something negative and you stop singing, right? So we have all these seeds. And then you get into adolescence, and adolescence is a hot mess. I don't care what anyone says. Your teenage years, trash, right? None of us have it figured out. You can be the popular kid. Like I had my friends, and I tried to be friends with everybody in high school. Like I was like, I'm just gonna be friends with everybody. And it was like the popular kids had deep-rooted insecurities. The not so popular kids had deep-rooted insecurities. The kids that were in the middle had what?
Deep-rooted insecurities.
We're a hot mess, and everyone's trying to find their lane. Then we get into our 20s, and we're on the verge of adulting. And we're even more of a hot mess, because now we got bills. Right? Like, you got people looking at you like you're supposed to have it all figured out. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, don't ask me questions. Right? Like, let's be honest. And now I'm stepping into my 30s, and what my 30s have become, and this is why it's been so much fun, is because my 30s have been cleaning up the hot mess. And realizing, like, we're all a hot mess and no one has this figured out. I don't care how well put together the world looks, it's like, you open up anybody's closet and you're like, what the hell, what is that, right? Like, come on. But when you step into a space of humility, and I think our 30s are very humbling because you're like, oh, 30s, I'm getting old. We're not even close. My grandmother and grandfather just turned 93 and 95, respectively. And my grandma's advice, because she is a hot mess moving, like she's nonstop, and she literally, like I got family that's in their 50s that couldn't keep up with her if they tried. And she was like, baby, nobody knows what they're doing. Smile and fail forward. And she's like, at the end of the day, every day God puts air in your lungs. And before you go to bed at night, give grace to God and thank Him for the blessing that you were given. And if you wake up the next day, give Him grace and give thanks to God that you got another opportunity, because you're going to fail and you're going to fail royally. But if you fail with love, everything else changes. And you can't give love until you learn to give love to yourself. And if you're harboring any animosity, you're not truly in love. Like it just won't work. And so this journey has been absolutely incredible. Really just trying to get over the idea of being forsaken and stepping into a space of being forgiven. And learning how to forgive. Because my forgiveness to my father had nothing to do with him. And I had no idea. My grandma used to say this, and I was young, and I never got it. And I'm like, yo, what are you talking about? She's like, being angry or hating somebody is like holding a hot coal and expecting them to get burned. And in my mind, when I was young, I was like, why would I be holding a hot coal? And now I'm grown, and I'm like, my stupid butt's been holding a hot coal. So I decided to put it down. Not give it to my dad, because my conversations early when I was like, I'm trying to forgive him, was, I want you to take responsibility for what you did. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but somebody else has been there before. And so I was talking to him like, you owe me an apology. Look what you did to us. You know how much better my life would have been if you didn't do this? Like, and I was coming, and even sometimes without saying those things, energetically, my spirit was projecting those things. Because I'm like, listen, click, I would hang up on him, I'd be angry. Because the whole time I'm waiting for an apology. And when I sat down with him 4 years ago and I had a conversation with him, I realized that he was completely oblivious. In his drunken state. And sometimes this is the other side of it. So you could probably relate to a situation with friends. You ever had like a friend just be upset with you and not really know why? Like, and they not tell you they're upset with you, but their energy, how they talk to you is completely different. And you're like, what's wrong with them? And you're like, oh, that's just Tom today, right? Like, it's gonna be all right. And then they tell you like a month later, like, you said something that really pissed me off. I'm like, wait, what? What did I say? And they're like, well, I was wearing blue, and you told me that blue didn't look as good on me as green. And you're like, what? But I realized that I was doing the exact same thing with my dad because he had no idea. And for me, I had a list. Like, guys, my memory is ridiculous. Like, to like almost the outfits that I was wearing, to the place that we were at, the temperature. I grew up in Florida, so it's almost the exact same. Like Miami year-round, beautiful, right? But nonetheless, like I had this list of things, and I'm like, I know to the detail everything you did, what you said, and how much it hurt, and and he was just like, I did that? And I was just like, what do you... I get it. I'm not forgiving you because you don't even recall the hurt, because you were just a repetition of the cycle. And so I'm so grateful for God's grace. I'm so grateful that He's given me the opportunity to start processing these things before I have kids, right? Before I have a wife and a family. You know, somebody asked, one of my family members were like, you don't have any babies yet? Like, if you knew the work that I'm doing right now, you'd like, then just keep healing. Keep healing. You're on the right track, right? Like, you know, because I'm so grateful that God didn't give me things that I wasn't mature or mentally capable of handling and or keeping, right? Because I probably would have destroyed them. Not intentionally, but in repetition of my cycle, like the family, the environment. So, those are just some things that, you know, I truly wanted to share with you guys. I'm so grateful for grace. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you guys. And then there's a quote that's been with me since I was young, or a scripture, and it's the scripture that I live by. I try to read it, if not every day, every other day, and it's Matthew 17:20. And what has really helped me push forward is that I don't have to have it figured out. I don't have to know what I'm doing. I just have to have faith that I'm not alone, that God's got me. And he says in the scripture, he talks about the faith of a mustard seed. Right? Like, you don't need a lot of faith. The same way you don't need faith to keep breathing, right? You don't need to like think about breathing. You just know that air is coming into your lungs, right? You're just like, you don't have to see it, right? You know it's there, and as long as you're there, I keep operating from this faith. So Matthew 17, the faith of a mustard seed. And what I realized was that in this healing process, it's not that, so now I'm not looking at my father to be a father figure. Because like I told you guys, like I created this dynamic. He grew up in an environment that he was a duplication of. But because of who he was in my life, I created an expectation of him that was the polar opposite of who he was, that he could have never lived up to. I grew up in the era of Family Matters, The Cosby Show, Step by Step. I know y'all remember Step by Step.
Yeah.
Too, right? Like,
Yeah.
You know, Friday nights on TGIF were ridiculous. Right? But these were the men that I was like, that's what a dad's supposed to be like, and you're nothing like that, right? But I never even told him, like, hey, this is how I expect a dad to show up, right? You're not even like Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince. Like, you're terrible. So he was stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? He's being who he was taught to be, and also, I hate you for not being what I want you to be. And now in this process of faith, I'm like, now I just want you to be who God created you to be. And it has made this, he's not my, like I still, like I told him, I love him, I call him old man. I still haven't gotten to the space of calling him father because I lean so heavily on God. I'm like, God, you are the father that I needed. You've put men in my life to give me bits and pieces of the things I need to become. But we're actually developing a friendship. And that, guys, is so cool. Like now when he says something stupid, I can laugh, and he starts laughing, and I'm like, I used to get mad at you for this thing. Like, now we can actually joke and enjoy life, and it's free. It's so free. So if you've been in that space at all, or if any of that resonates with you, and it doesn't have to be necessarily even a father, right? I got a lot of friends that are dealing with things with their mothers, right? Like the absence of parents and the people that step in their life. Like, you know, there's so many levels to this. But at the end of the day, realizing that God's grace is showing me what love actually looks like. And by knowing what it looks like is because I'm learning what it feels like. So I appreciate you guys, and I guess we can open up for questions. I
more than anything, I just want to say thank you for being here, Marcus. Thank you for keeping it real and just being genuine. It really does mean a lot. So on that note, I just wanted to say, like, I really vibed and understood that psychological expectation. There's a quote that I have on my computer desk that says, "Let your motives, not your expectations, define you." And I just really feel like if you lead with that in terms of like wanting to develop a relationship, whether it's family, an intimate relationship, or a friendship, whatever it is, like that's really where that love component that Christ has instilled in us comes from. I also wanted to say for the trees, thank you for introducing me to Tim Anderson, because he actually was the one who told me, he's like, sometimes I just go up to my dad, I'm like, Dad, I just need a pat on the head. His dad's 97 years old and just goes up and is just like, you know, like just like that, just to know that he did something good. So I really think that says something about the power of the Father.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Anybody else?
I think that sometimes the absence of a parent is obvious, but sometimes it's not obvious because they're there, but there's specific moments where you've been there and then not responding.
Very true.
So,
Very true. And it's like, so for those 14 years that my dad was there, he was toxic. And then for the rest of my life, when my family, like my mom was there, like, we got to get the heck out of here. We drove from Miami, Florida to Scottsdale for 3 days. And then during my developmental years, there was no father figure. And I'm like, what's going on now? So now I'm mad at you because I hated you then. Now I need you and I don't have you. I'm like, it's crazy. But you start to just really learn that everything given to you is to serve your greater purpose, not to punish you.
Oh, I came in late, but I can really relate to a lot with that you were saying, and I feel like our stories are actually quite similar. And so I just remember my dad and I call him Dad, and I actually talk to him. I'm one of the few, probably out of all his kids, that has a relationship where I can call him on stuff, and I keep telling him, like, Dad, the stuff that you're doing, it's what's causing you to have these relationships, like with my brothers and sisters. This is why they don't want to talk to you. And he actually listens to me now, but it took a long time. Like, I remember going through the same stages, like I hated him for what he wasn't, I hated him for what he was, and it did take me a long time. I remember one of my counseling sessions where they were saying, like you said, he got it from his dad, and he was creating that, and right now I feel like I'm really thankful for the way that God has like built our relationship, because I remember it was like 7 years ago, he stood me up on Father's Day, we were supposed to have like breakfast, and I was just like, I'm done with him after that. And then God slowly working on this, going through the same stages, like where he was like I would just, all the stuff that he did kept coming back. And it was like ripping that Band-Aid off again and ripping it off. And I had to get to the point to where I actually forgave him. And when I forgave him was when I was able to heal. And all the stuff that I was doing to myself with other people, because it came out of my other relationships. And it made me a really destructive person. And I'm so thankful and really happy that you've gone through that healing, because I've been there too. So. Yeah, and people like Tim, that's why I was able to, I can pass it on to other people so they can get that same feeling.
Hi. Thank you for coming, Marcus. What advice would you give to someone who is in that angry spot, that they are just so full of anger at someone who wasn't there, someone who had abused them, or just somebody who did not measure up to their expectations? What first step do you feel like is a good thing for someone to just start and working on? I think there's a lot of people like in this room who have had that situation. I know I have, and I've gone through my own process, but or they know someone who needs to hear it. What would you do? What would you say? Like, just what should they start thinking about?
So, to be honest, I'm not going to shoot on anybody. I just don't believe in that. So I'm not going to be able to give you advice on how. I can just tell you what I had to do. And I had to look in the mirror and I had to get really honest with myself and acknowledge that the anger was there. Because for me, I pretended like it didn't exist. Like it was just normal to be upset if he did it because he was my scapegoat. Right? So it was my cop-out. Like I'm only angry with my dad. It's only him that's the problem. He's the cancer. He's the problem. And the whole time God's like, well, if you don't stop fogging up this mirror. I was like, your dad's under, he's in Miami, you're in Scottsdale, you're still angry from a phone conversation. So it was really like humbling myself and being like, well, why am I angry? I had to explore what were the things that were upsetting me and how they were showing up in my life. And this was the hardest part. how many times do I do that same thing to somebody else? Maybe not physically, but in some way, shape, or form. How often was I hurting people the same way? And so that was the starting point for me. So once I became real with it, then I didn't hide it. Like I had to start talking to people. And I started to put it out there. And the first person I called was actually my first pastor when we moved to Arizona. She's now moved to Boston, but she was phenomenal in just helping me have the conversation with myself, essentially. And so that was huge. So the first part was, and she was just like, oh, you remember the old G.I. Joe cartoons? And I was like, of course. She's like, what are they in with? Knowing is half the battle. And I was like, oh my God. I've been trying to fight a battle about a battle when I can just acknowledge that there's a battle. So that was huge for me. But then finding somebody that you can confide in, that you can talk through this with. And again, my first pastor, she was there because she was from the outside looking in. And like, you don't realize that you're just fogging up the mirror that God's putting up for you to acknowledge. That helps, Mark.
So, Sarah, a little bit to your point, and the last video talks about this quite a bit, the Louie Giglio did. And Marcus, you touched about it as well. You know, forgiveness is a process. I mean, you said you've been on this for 4 years, and you know, as Christians, we like to say, "Well, I've forgiven you, and everything's better." It's like, no. But I was really drawn back to, for those of you who were in this series, the True Spirituality series a year ago, Chip Ingram talks about forgiveness. And he's like, it's a process. And he says it's 3 steps. Forgive, forgiving, and forgiven. And you have to first make that step to forgive, to not seek retribution. You know, vengeance is mine. And I can't cite all of Romans 12 on this, but the forgiving part, he's like, you pray for them. You actually pray to them for God to bless their lives. Because, and if you remember, Pastor Lynn's talked about this as a lot, it's hard to stay mad at somebody you are praying for. You know, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Can't say the scripture, but it's in there. And then the last part of when you're truly forgiving somebody is when you can take joy when they have been blessed. And so that's something, again, I had to draw back to when Louie Giglio was like talking about forgiving your father or your mother or whoever in your life. It's like, yeah, it's a process. What's the process? And that drew me back to that series we went through.
You said that's on video?
Yeah, it's on Right Now Media. He did a whole thing on it's called True Spirituality. We actually have that linked in our lesson archive. If anybody's new here, we have a lesson archive of all of 2019. So you can go back and take a look at all this, the life group notes, the session notes that we went through, and so it was actually one of the most powerful series. It's transformative. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, sounds like it. I need to get a part of that because I feel like with my dad, I'm in the final phase of this, but I just want to be aware because I don't want to revert back, right? Because sometimes those old wounds will be like, dang, I didn't even know that hurt me. I'm walking with a limp, right? It creeps up on you, right? It's kind of like how our bodies are hurting now. I'm like, I'm not that old.
But it was leg day yesterday, right?
Yeah, I skipped it. Twice a week. Skinny. Anyway, but the process, like, it's just been so much fun. Like, and I can tell you guys, I'm having so much more fun with life. Like, I'm encountering situations where, like, I have a high level of discernment, and so I feel people very quickly and clearly. And if I felt you and I didn't like it, I'm like, ugh. Now I'm like, be you. Like, be you. God, now in my mind, God's working on you the same way He's working on me. And I don't know what chapter you're on in your work project, but I'm graduating in mine, and I'm having so much more fun. Again, I still can't believe I told my dad I love you. Like, what? I promise you guys, I promise you, I was in such a dark space. Like, and again, just to be transparent, and I mean, this is what freaked my mom out, but I'm not a violent person. But the reason we left was that night he came home drunk after not being home for 2 days, and he's fighting my mom in our living room. I'm 13 years old, and I didn't know what to do. I was really small too as a kid, so you guys know. I was like, my freshman year of high school, I was 5'2", 5'2 and a half. Yes. right? I was excited to get to 6 foot. They were like, oh, you might hit 6 foot. I was like, yay! But I was really little as a kid. And so I'm freaking out because my mom's doing her best to like physically fight off my father, who's a grown man. And I just ran to his room and I grabbed this gun. And I pointed it at him. And I was like, in my pain and in my hurt, I was ready to do something that I wasn't actually ready to do. My mom steps between us. She takes the gun down and she's like, go pack a bag. And he's like, what? Let him be a man. Let him be a man. And she was like, if you don't leave, because his tears stopped when he had your gun. Like, so he left in a drunken rage. He walked out. By the time he came home the next day, we were already on the road to Arizona. And my mom, in her panic, was like, I would have ruined your entire life because I didn't leave sooner. And so we just had this conversation not too long ago where it was like, hey, just so you know, like, I've forgiven you. Because you didn't know that what you were in and what was hard for you to walk away from was going to yield that kind of a result. Right? Because we don't know what we don't know. That's why, like, sometimes when we're in our storm, we can only focus on the storm. It's like, man, this sucks, man, this sucks, man, this sucks. But every storm eventually runs out of rain. And who are we going to be on the other side of that? So, Laura, give me that.
I've known Marcus for 4 years or so now, and he's been a mentor. He's been a mindset life coach for me. He's challenged me in my relationship with my father, with my mom too, and he's an awesome person. So if you guys have any questions for him or want to follow him on social media or whatnot and connect with him on a personal, more deeper level, he loves connecting with people, and he's a great friend to have. So thank you.
Thank you guys.